This is the AJAZZ AC067 in the iron grey colourway. This is another CNC aluminium keyboard that I've bought in the pursuit for group buy quality from an in-stock keyboard, much like the ZU65 review from a few videos ago. This one comes as a fully assembled keyboard, so we'll do a stock typing test to see what we're working with, then we'll strip and mod it to see how close we can get to some of the more premium CNC aluminium keyboards. I'll link this keyboard and some other colour options in the description below. If you buy using my affiliate links or discount codes, you'll get between 5 and 10% off your order. In terms of the general specification of the keyboard, this little number actually packs a hell of a punch for the $159 price tag. It's the very nice compact 65% Ansi layout. It has this CNC aluminium case with glitter coating. It's gasket mounted, has a south facing hot swappable PCB with per key RGB. It has a polycarbonate plate. It comes with EVA case foams and an IXPE switch sheet. It's a wireless keyboard with Trimode Connect. It comes with double shot PBT keycaps, and it comes with what EpoMaker called Kaihl Ice Cream switches, which much to my surprise is just a set of creams, which is a dope set of stock switches for a $159 keyboard. On the face of it, the CNC case, gasket mount, Trimode Connect, double shot PBT keycaps and a set of creams is an absolutely banging specification for the price, so let's get it out of the box and see what we're working with. In the box you get the fully assembled keyboard, some white accent keycaps, a switch and keycap puller, a braided cable, an Allen key for the case screws, the 2.4 GHz dongle and the instruction manual. The only thing missing is the additional bottom row Mac keycaps you'd expect to see with a keyboard compatible with Windows and Mac. So let's hear the stock typing test. My initial thoughts on the stock typing test are that while there's nothing untoward or strikingly bad, the sound was quite thin and muted, which I wasn't expecting. To try and narrow down the cause of this, I decided to test some Keyput Tropical Waters V2 in the keyboard, switches I know to be deep and full sounding. The reason for doing this was because at the time I didn't realise the so-called Kaihl Ice Cream switches were actually just a set of normal creams, and I wanted to rule out the switches as a cause of the thin sound profile. While the Tropical Waters switches sound a little better, we're only really hearing the difference between lubed and unlubed switches, as creams are also a nice set of switches. The creams are pre-lubed according to the website, but you wouldn't know it. Given the switches aren't the culprit, I decided to try some GMK keycaps to see how these compare to the stock keycaps. Once again, a marginal gain at best as you'd expect when comparing GMK keycaps against a more budget alternative, so also not the culprit. Armed with that bit of extra information from those tests, additional to sorting out the stabs and switches, I know I need to play around with the dampening to get some more volume out of the keyboard, then I'll see if it needs anything else doing depending on what we hear when it's a bit louder. Okay, let's take it apart. Keycaps off and switches out, as we'll be stripping it right down to play around with the dampening between the plate and PCB, as well as the case dampening. Then we'll take the stabilizers out as they need some work. To get the case apart, we just remove the 8 screws from the bottom, then we can lift off the top case. From here I actually lifted out the plate, the dampening and the PCB individually, as the plate and PCB assembly isn't screwed together, it's just held together by the switches. We need to unplug the daughterboard and 2000 mAh battery before lifting out the PCB. That's the keyboard stripped down, so let's take a look at the build quality of the components. The polycarbonate plate is nice quality and without without flex cuts. The plate foam is very thin and low density, and to be honest, it is pretty ragged, looking like the keyboard was assembled without too much care and attention. It will serve its purpose though if I decide to run with it. The switch sheet is nice quality and I would expect to run this, but I will test it with and without. The PCB looks to be nice quality and also without flex cuts. You can see the switch for switching between wired and wireless modes is underneath the spacebar, which I actually quite like as it keeps the keyboard looking nice and clean. The EVA case dampening comes in the form of two thin EVA sheets. Given how thin these are, I suspect there is very little space below the PCB for acoustics, which will be why the keyboard is so muted. I expect the removal of these will be the biggest gain in terms of making the keyboard a little louder. The top case is nice and solid and houses the thinner top pour-on gaskets. The case is a really nice colour and I really like the texture the glitter coating creates. The bottom case houses the daughter board and a 2000 mAh battery. The bottom pour-on gaskets are seriously chunky, and if I decide to run without the bottom dampening, I expect the gasket travel to be long, smooth and consistent across the board, which I like as it means the gasket isn't restricted anywhere, which would affect the typing sound and feel. The bottom of the case has this polished mountain logo surrounded again by the glitter coating, which is intended to resemble the night sky full of stars. I have to say, everything is very nice quality and I'm still thinking this is an absolute deal at $159, provided I can improve the typing sound, and that's what we're going to look at next. First off, I wanted to confirm that the so-called ice cream switches are in fact the creams we all know and love. I suspect ice creams is just a different name for creams, and I have some lubed creams in stock for checking this. Side by side, the switches look exactly the same, both from the outside while assembled and when opened up. All the plastic components look exactly the same and they are clearly both all POM switches. The springs are the same, everything looks exactly the same. I did a spring weight test by pressing the switches together. The properly lubed switch began to stroke in slightly earlier than the unlubed switch, as you'd expect due to the reduced friction, but they stroked out at the same speed, so I'm confident they are the same springs and the stock switches are in fact creams. To save myself some time, I'm just going to straight swap the stock switches for the lubed ones and I'll lube them later. First, we're going to reassemble the plate and PCB with just a few switches and the switch sheet and plate foam installed for testing with and without the case dampening. Here's the difference, but only through the camera mic, so you may not hear it. The keyboard does get louder without the case foam as you'd expect, so I'll run without that in the next assembly. Next, we'll test it with the switch sheet installed but without the plate dampening. Again, you may not hear it through the camera mic, but it sounds like it will be too hollow sounding without the plate foam. Next, we'll test it without the plate foam or switch sheet. On that one, the sound is higher pitched as you'd expect when losing the switch sheet, and is still more hollow than I would like as the plate foam is still out. Based on those tests, we're going to reassemble with both the plate foam and switch sheet in, but we'll leave both the case dampening sheets out. Before we do that, we're going to sort out the stabilizers. All I did here was balance the spacebar wire, lube the outside of the stems and the inside of the housings with Krytox 205 grade 0, then lube the wires with dielectric grease. I installed and tested the stabilizers as I went. So let's get the keyboard back together for the next typing test. The changes and mods on this build from the first are the switches are now lubed, the stabilizers are balanced and re-lubed, and the case dampening is removed. On that build, we've made the keyboard a little louder by removing the case dampening, the switches sound much nicer because they're properly lubed, and the stabilizers are sounding better after tuning and lubing. That said, I can definitely hear that there is still room for improvement. I like a richer and deeper sounding keyboard usually achieved through the PE foam mod, but as this already has a switch sheet installed, I was pretty sure the tape mod would get this one over the finish line for me. To do the tape mod, we only need to open the case again for removing the plate and PCB assembly, but the plate and PCB assembly can stay together. I applied a 3-layer tape mod to get the poppier, slightly louder and deeper sound profile from it. So let's get it back together and see if it worked. Well, that did it, and I hope that came across in the typing test and comparison from the stock typing test. To finish off, we'll just quickly run through some of the features and my thoughts on the keyboard. First, let's look at the gasket movement. It's a really plush gasket and is very even across the keyboard, as the movement comes from those chunky bottom gaskets as opposed to relying on flex alone. There are no flex cuts, which I think was the way to go on this one, as it really isn't necessary with such a good gasket system, and the sound was already on the thin side. Before testing the RGB and other features, we're going to connect this to a device in Bluetooth mode. First, you need to remove the spacebar to get to the switch underneath for switching it to wireless mode. The keyboard connects to up to 3 devices in Bluetooth mode. First, you hold down function plus Q, W or E to put the keyboard in pairing mode, then connect it to your device. Once paired to more than one device, you switch between them by short pressing function Q, W or E for the Bluetooth connections and function plus R for the 2.4 GHz connection. Function plus S places the keyboard in Mac system mode, and function plus A places the keyboard in Windows system mode. The RGB is nice and bright. You can adjust the brightness, change the color, change the effect speed, and change the effect. You even get 3 game lighting effects built in. The stock keycaps are really nice on this one. They're cherry profile double shot PBT. They don't look or feel cheap and are around 1.4mm thick. I see no reason to replace these based on quality alone. As we discovered, you get a set of creams in this keyboard, which is a really good set of switches to get stock in any keyboard. They are pre-lubed, but I would say it's the absolute bare minimum amount of lube to be able to actually label them pre-lubed, and I obviously do recommend lubing them to get the most out of them. To summarise, with all things considered, the aluminium case, the nice grey colourway and glitter coating, the plush gasket mount, the Trimode Connect, the really nice stock build out, and the fact that with some easy to do mods and configuration changes, we've managed to get this keyboard sounding and feeling so nice, I really think this is a very nice little keyboard. Much like the ZU65 from a few videos ago, the AC067 is well worth a look if you don't want those group by weights, but do want a little taste of that group by quality. I hope you found this useful, and I'll catch you in the next one.